Hey, everybody. Before we get started, I want to do a huge thank you to our top tier YouTube members. Currently, the YouTube stuff is turned off, having some issues collecting some of the funds that were earned on the channel. Hopefully, we are able to recover those. But before we do, I just want to say a quick thank you for the people who still did pay World Champ Level A, Triple Crown, Palmer Chisel, Grand Slam Champ, Freak Maniac 90210, and Raz. Currently, the super chats and donations on YouTube and are turned off, as well as joining memberships. But we do have Patreon. We do have our different ways you can tip and donate via PayPal, Cash App, and stuff in the links below in the link tree, as well as merchandise. We have all of our main logos like the Tornado Tag, ABJ Podcast, 5 Questions, but we have these 4 logos that will be available until the 13th. We have the Fresh Prince, the WCW, the Dynasty, and the ABJ 420. So if you want to support us, head over there. Also, check out the Ben Frank Connection merchandise. They have a lot of cool stuff over there. Brand new fanny packs with some that look like title belts. You can get your favorite Ben Frank Connection show on that, as well as these cool club shirts. All right, without further ado, let's get into the ABJ podcast Tornado Tag episode 135, the history of Paul Heyman with BP Burke, baby. Let's get it.
This is a Ben Frank Connection presentation.
What is going on? We are live. ABJ presents Tornado Tag 135, the history of Paul Heyman, myself, ABJ, and BP Burke on the call tonight, doing the history of Paul Heyman. How you been, man? It's been a while. We haven't done one of these in a minute.
Yeah, since before Mania. So that was an adventure. Mania was an adventure. We ran into each other a few times there. Keeping busy with some wrestling stuff. But yeah, always good to be back on here. Back on. We can't really call it the mothership because that's somebody else's gimmick, but
yeah,
the flagship, the original, the OG.
Yeah. So, well, let's kind of dive into that. What was your Mania like? How was your weekend?
I had a great time. I was down there from Thursday to Monday morning. I went down there with the intention of maybe if the price dropped enough, I'm going to go to night 2. I'm going to both nights of Mania. Hung out on South Street with you for a little bit. Hung out at Attic Brewing with you for a little bit for Big Dan's birthday party. I wound up at Ring of Honor. I wound up at the Clusterfuck. I wound up at a bunch. Chris probably way too soon on the YouTube video. But I wound up at the Cluster. You know what? Just a fun time all around.
We're not monetized anymore. You're good.
Sat through an earthquake. All fun stuff. All fun stuff.
So it's funny. We were at Attic Brewing, and you were drinking, you were having a good time, and I remember you just look at your phone. You're like, "Here's the price for 2 nights," and he's like, "I might only just do night 2," and then another beer goes down, and then another beer goes down. You're like, "Guess who's going to Mania both nights?"
Yeah.
I'm proud that honestly, man, like you work really, really hard, not just in life, and like you work really hard at your job. You work really hard in content. You work really, like, you're just a hardworking dude, man. And honestly, like sometimes I get a little bitter when it comes to wrestling, and you keep me very grounded just for your love of the art and the idea of what pro wrestling is. And also your love for Philadelphia and all things Philadelphia. And I'm really happy that you pulled the trigger, because it is hard for you to spend $1 sometimes.
I am very cheap. I'm notoriously cheap.
And the fact that you pulled the trigger and did it, like, I was really happy for you. I'm glad you did that.
And that was really the final determination there. It was, well, okay, I was at the first WrestleMania in Philadelphia. That was 25 years ago. Who knows? It might be 25 years before it comes back. I'll be either 65 or dead by that point. So let's do it. And it was so cool to be in my favorite place in the world, surrounded by my favorite thing in the world. So just an incredible weekend.
Yeah. Well, so like highlights, you can include anything at Mania, but what are some highlights that you experienced from that week?
Night 2 of Mania is probably the most fun I've ever had at a wrestling event in my life. I was up in the nosebleeds, but it was still fun. It was still fun, like just being in that building, feeling that energy, that that Avengers Endgame ending of Roman and Cody was so fun. And just before that, as Bailey and Io Sky was ending, it was just the little things like this. As Bailey and Io Sky are ending, I go down to use the restroom because I don't want to leave my seat during the main event. As I'm coming out, who do I run into? Tom Mitchell. Out of nowhere, I just run into Tom Mitchell. Yeah, so
That's sick.
Just little things like that. Tom Mitchell, of course, from PPW, who I kind of learned the backstage interview game from before he went on to do bigger and better things as a wrestler. Just so many fun things like that happened all the time. Like I was at a GCW show. I ran into Facade and Danny Moe. They were there. Well, Facade was in the clusterfuck. Then I was at the Ring of Honor show. Of course, I ran into surprise, Matt Turner. And I ran into Nolan Pierce and Mark Alexander. It was just so fun being in the center of Philadelphia, Center City, Philadelphia, just walking around all these places, and everybody you see is in an LA Knight shirt, a CM Punk shirt, a Bloodline shirt. It's like it was truly a takeover, and it was so cool. It was just an amazing time.
It was awesome, man. I only got to go to 3 events I was at, but I think the 3 events I went to were definitely enough of a feel for me to say I experienced Mania Week. Attic Brewing, Labor of Love, knocked it out of the park. I mean, you guys can see the vlog; it's up there. Definitely go check out the journals, the ABJ journals. Day 1 and 2 for Attic is all there with Labor of Love, and then Suplex Vintage Wrestling Show was unbelievable. Like, I didn't realize how many people were there until I stood up and looked down both sides of the street and couldn't see the end of people.
That entire block of South Street was full. That was an amazing time.
I couldn't believe it. Like the I don't think I'll ever probably do commentary in front of that many people ever again. That's a pinnacle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very cool.
And some of the matches we got to call, like obviously being excited for Nick Wayne, Marcus Mathers, Jordan Oliver, Griffin McCoy, Jimmy Lloyd, and Joey Janela. But honestly, like seeing Deshaun Pratt and Matt Quay in front of that many people and like
so cool
them get that experience was super special to me. Like that match, it was hard to put myself into like Deshaun's the heel character because you're both wrestling in front of like 3,000 people in the middle of the street Mania weekend. And I love both of those guys so goddamn much. Like
just wild times.
So much fun. I love that show so much. Huge thank you to Labor of Love for letting me record there, as well as Suplex Vintage Wrestling for having me. That was awesome. I wouldn't trade that experience in for the world. So what do we got going on coming up?
Just news-wise, speaking of WrestleMania, this is more big nationwide news, but it was officially announced today, April 19th and 20th next year, WrestleMania in Las Vegas.
I'm going. I'm putting my claim.
I'm probably going to be paying off this year's WrestleMania by then, so I'm very much maybe leaning no, just because it's going to be maybe a little outside of my price range, but who knows? Who knows? Anything could happen. I said that about
I'll take you to Pilgrim. I'll get you tuned up. And you'll be buying tickets.
I'll be mortgaging my house to buy tickets to WrestleMania 41. But it should be a fun time. It's interesting though. Like I didn't even realize that's Easter Sunday. WrestleMania Night 2 is going to be on Easter Sunday.
I'm dressing as Jesus.
There you go. Yeah,
sold. I'm going to be wrestling Jesus
in Sin City.
In Sin City.
But more so locally. And
don't tell me. I might walk around and drink beers as Jesus.
In Vegas, nobody will bat an eye. Nobody will bat an eye in Vegas. Nobody will give a damn. Do what you want to. Oh, Jesus. Oh, another Jesus. Oh, another Jesus.
Yeah, I'm definitely doing. And it also will be 420. Yeah, I will be tuned up for Mania Week. Yeah.
But yeah, so as far as like stuff that is more local, more personal, coming up this coming Sunday, a week from tonight, I will be at Slatington Expo Center, as I usually am on a Saturday, but it'll be a Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon matinee show, 3:00, PPW Thunder Road. The Mecca Brian Johnson returns to the ring. Hasn't been in a PPW match in 2024. Was put out of action by Clutch Adams. He'll be back. He'll be in action against Clutch Adams. We announced a big show. What I think is going to be the show stealer, Diego Hill and GKM is going to be a big one. You talked about Griffin McCoy earlier. Griffin McCoy and the new PPW Women's Champion Sammy Chaos against Facade and Danny Moe in a mixed tag. It's going to be a fun show. It's going to be a really
I think
fun
Sammy
show.
that week recently just like snagged 3 titles in one weekend
and put Danny Moe through a door.
Yeah,
put
Sammy,
Danny Moe through a door.
I love Danny Moe,
yeah,
but I'm a Sammy Chaos fan.
Sammy Chaos is something.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And then
good luck PPW Women's Division. Like, good luck.
It's gonna be tough to see who can stop her. And
yeah,
but that was such a great thing, and with a very few exceptions. That Super Show 2 in April, we haven't done a show since then. It was something it was a show that meant a lot to me because I put a lot into it, especially behind the scenes, and with a few exceptions, everything went off as good as can be expected. So I was so happy with that. But
you know who would be an interesting one to come back and challenge Sammy?
Christina
Marie.
Christina Marie, maybe. Yeah, that would be a good one. There's
interesting.
There may be some Blast in the Past coming up soon. I can't say a whole lot, but you may be looking into the past of PPW to see if somebody's kind of comes back to reclaim some territory. That's all I can really say.
Interesting.
That's all I can really say.
You know who's another guy I'd like to see come back to PPW? Paul Bow. I hope you're listening. bring back an old champion. Bring back Sean Carr.
Maybe, but yeah, who knows? There might be a little bit of something that could be happening soon. You never know.
Yeah, that'd be exciting stuff. I will also be at PPW that week. I'll be bringing a friend of mine from the UK, used to live in the area. He's gonna come and hang out. The Addictively Speaking podcast, James, is gonna be coming with us that show. Gonna grab some content, hopefully get some 5 questions with ABJ with some people. The last one went really well. I enjoyed doing it. So huge thank you for Paul and everyone at PPW and Slatington for letting me film there. It's not just for wrestlers too. So if you want to be a part of it, hit me up. I'm down to talk to anybody and do 5 questions with.
I was going to say you could talk to Chris White because he's involved in the beer business too, but he's a wrestler now too.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna try to interview. I'm having a brain fart.
Travis,
just because
you're gonna do 5 questions with a guy who has his jaw wired shut. That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting. What a madman that guy is.
He is awesome.
So much respect for a guy doing a promo with his literally hours after surgery in his recovery bed with his jaw wired shut, and he's cutting promos.
That man is dedicated. Was he out cold? Did he get knocked out cold?
I don't know if he went out, but he was in a bad way. He was.
It looked bad.
Yeah. But he's not. He is insisting that he's not missing any time, not skipping any beats. That is a hustler. That is a
good guy. Yeah, and then we'll be at we'll also be the next weekend on a Saturday. Myself and you will be doing some the New Era Pro Wrestling. We will be getting our office on. We will be at the Steamtown Mall, baby.
Yes.
The Electric City.
What's it called now? The Shops at Steamtown. Never been there.
Yeah,
never been there.
It's gonna be awesome.
I think I've driven through Scranton, but I'm not sure if I've ever been in Scranton proper, or at least like
Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
If you've been in one, they just count them both as the same thing. They don't like when you say that, by the way. So
I'm sure they don't.
Yeah. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. So definitely go check us out at PPW as well as New Era Pro Wrestling all this week. I think that's all the shows.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything else booked. If you want to buy tickets, links are below. The links below for PPW as well as New Era Pro Wrestling. Even if you're not in the area and you buy a ticket, send me the stubs so we can let the venues know that those seats are still, not available, but they're donations through the ABJ podcast. Right. Or if you can physically be there, please come. I think New Era is going to add a tab on their page when you buy tickets that's called the ABJ ticket. So if you're not physically going to be there, I think they're adding it. I could be wrong. So if you do support them and go about that route, it would be a huge help for not only myself and BP to use the Tornado Tag podcast to sell some tickets and help some local wrestling venues. Also, huge thank you to High Tension Wrestling. So not only are we live right now on my YouTube channel, we are also live on the High Tension YouTube channel as well. So we are simulcasting. So if you're watching this there, please head over to High Tension Wrestling and give them a subscribe as well. The link is below. Because we are going to be like a partner podcast. All of our content that will be on this channel will also be there and help them get their watch hours, help them get their algorithm going, that they're an active channel. And we're going to be teaming up with that. Also, make sure you support the Ben Frank Connection. A lot of great content over there. I believe today it might have aired. Listen, today was not a great day for me mentally, but we're bouncing back. But today they just dropped an episode with John Alba for their 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
So and I think there was a special call in.
I've heard there was, yes.
Yeah, so John Alba does a podcast with a pretty broken guy, you know, and he may have called in the episode. So definitely go check that out. And their episode 50 just dropped with Mr. Kennedy. I didn't watch when he was there, so I don't know. Mr. Anderson, not Kennedy. Sorry. He wasn't, when I was consuming wrestling, I'd never really seen anything for him. Backlash happened today, just to kind of put you in perspective. I didn't get a chance to watch it yet. I heard it was a fun show.
Yeah,
the crowd was fantastic.
I saw Randy Orton and Kevin Owens make their entrance, and that's all I really saw. I got the Cliff's Notes, so I guess the big news coming out of it was that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill won the women's tag titles, but I don't know that 100%.
I heard it wasn't a great showcase either. I heard Jade looked.
I've heard that AJ and Cody Rhodes was very good, and of course the big news-wise is the debut of Tonga Loa, the former tag team partner of Tama Tonga, the Gorillas of Destiny now. Firmly
GOD versus Usos. Let's make it happen. GODs versus Usos. We need it. Stop playing games. Book it.
And that could be. It could be. A lot of people think it could be that OG bloodline versus a new bloodline, which they have to be very careful with that. Just because you don't want it to be NWO Black and White versus NWO Wolfpack.
Oh, that's where we're going. Hopefully. This is Bloodline Wolfpack right now. Like, that's literally what's happening. This is NWO Bloodline Wolfpack.
And here, how's this for a segue? With the reluctant advisor for the Bloodline Wolfpack, one Paul Heyman.
I'm gonna be honest. At first, this when I seen the storyline, I was like, oh, I don't know if it got me. You know what I mean? I'm happy Tonga's there. I'm happy GOD's thing. But I honestly, what's making it exciting is the fact that Paul Heyman is putting over people who aren't on screen once again, and Paul is selling this story. The fact that Paul is terrified of like the way he's selling it for Solo is making it all worth the while. But yeah, so Jacob Fatu joins the bad side. Bring in Lance on Hawaii on the other side.
I'm all for that.
Yeah,
I'm all for that.
That's what we need. That's the only two members of the bloodline that I need left. Just put Jacob Fatu on one side and put Lance on Hawaii with the Usos on the other side. And if you want to add another one on that team, go for it. But that's what we need. I'm not a fan of mixing GOD as a bloodline. They're not bloodline. They're Tongan. It always annoys me. I can see that, but also like Snuka, wasn't he like married into?
He like the honorary family, and I know that Haku was very much especially like The Rock. The Rock, in The Rock's first book, maybe his only book, he talks about Haku being Uncle Tonga. That's what he called him growing up, Uncle Tonga. Yeah. And literally, the first pair of wrestling trunks The Rock had were gifted to him by Haku, by Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa's father.
I love Haku. God, I love Haku.
King Haku. Let's put some respect on that name. King Haku.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, King Haku. Don't kill me. I like my ears. But yeah, I'm pumped. The crowd was unbelievable. I think WB. Here's the biggest thing, wrestling fans. Step your game up. When you pay a ticket to go to a show, bro, France, and the UK for AEW, Puerto Rico. If you don't step your game up, they're going to book shows overseas, because that crowd, from what I've seen, absolutely bonkers. Like, how do you not want to be in front of a crowd like that all the time?
Yeah, no, that is incredible.
I seen a clip on Twitter where they're doing ring intros for phenomenal AJ Styles and Cody Rhodes, and the crowd is jumping so much in their seat. The hard cam is like shaking. Like, they had that place rocking. Like,
and that's that scarcity thing. Like, they don't get a lot of live shows there. And France is really, if France knocked it out of the park, the UK always knocks it out of the park. Puerto Rico knocked it out of the park. And that was one of the great things about night 2 of Mania, especially night 1. The crowd was a little off. It was cold. It was cold in that stadium night 1. Night 2, like, that was the first time I've ever been in the building where the building literally shook. The building literally shook when Cody won that title. It was amazing.
That's so sick, dude. Philly, but they said Philly's on the list again. Like, they definitely want to bring it back. They were really happy with the turnout, but they're also talking about maybe moving Mania to like up a little bit, like maybe to make it so it's not as cold for outdoor venues.
Yeah, they did talk of, well, they moved it back about 2 weeks for next year, April the 19th and 20th. That's late for Mania.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons they did that too, but Vegas is in a cold weather city, so and I believe Allegiant Stadium's a dome anyway. But or at least a retractable dome. But they didn't want to be, when running that first weekend of April, they're consistently up against the Final Four on night one, because that's and the Raw after Mania, which is this big ratings grabber, is up against the NCAA championship game. So moving it back 2 weeks puts it in a bit of a dead zone in sports. The only thing you're really up against is baseball. The basketball playoffs, hockey playoffs haven't really gotten going full swing yet. It might be like the NBA playing games. They might be getting a few other things, but yeah, time will tell. Time will tell. Do
you think we get a Mania in a not an American soil after these last performances?
If we do, it's probably London. Money talks. Money talks. If London, or if London especially, if they throw enough money at WWE, it will
Wembley
happen.
Stadium.
I think Mania at Wembley, and they might do it just to say we beat AEW's record. We'll get one more person in that building than AEW got.
We'll give away
they might do that. Never underestimate the power of spite. Never underestimate
the
that.
pettiness of AEW.
Spite is the most powerful force in the world. Spite can move mountains,
especially in wrestling.
Yes, especially in pro wrestling. Yes, 100%. Most of what happens in pro wrestling
fueled
is born
by
out of spite. Yes.
Yeah, fueled by spite. That's a new t-shirt.
And with Mania, with London, the other thing too is you can do it where the time difference is not significant. You can do a London Mania. I'm not 100% on time difference, but if you started the Mania at like 2 p.m. US time, I believe that translates to like 8 p.m. GMT.
I'm gonna tell you right now, when AEW was in London for their show, it feels like it was starting that Mania week for All In London, and I think that's going to be a recurring trend where like all these indie promotions run the same weekend, and it has that Mania vibe for All In. So if WWE does it, man, that local independent scene in London is bonkers.
That UK independent scene that WWE helped kill 8 years ago.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like it. Honestly, it was my favorite experience I've ever had. Like it was so much fun. Like how you said, people walking around Philly and like, dude, you're walking around London like at a tourist spot for the Beatles, and there's a guy wearing a MJF shirt, and you're just like, let's go, baby. Like it was awesome.
And that was so cool. And especially the places that kind of went along with it. I didn't wind up going there because it was packed. Like it was, you couldn't move. But I was going to stop by McGillen's Old Ale House in Philly, which is the oldest continuously running tavern in the country. It's been open and continuously running since like the 1800s.
Yeah.
And it's in this, it was just so packed in there. But they had like their entire menu, or they had a special menu that was all like Hell in a Shell tacos and things like that. So they really jumped into it, but it was too packed. So I went to the barcade next door.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump into our topic this week.
Speaking of Philadelphia.
Speaking of Philadelphia, we did I got some feedback on our last episode. Someone says, I waited 20 minutes to hear the episode, like to hear about the topic. Well, welcome to the show. That's how we start
24. How do you like that?
Yeah. Because you complained, now you're getting an extra 4 minutes, you son of a bee. That's what we do. We usually, have a little bit of banter in the beginning, and then we dive into the main topic. But let's get into it here. Episode 135, the history of Paul Heyman.
And what a history it is. What a history it is. This is a guy who he has had his hand in so many things, and he is a guy, Paul Heyman, who really is kind of the last real manager. And what I mean by that is the last guy who was a manager when there were still managers, like when a manager was an important part of the equation. And even before that, he has been in professional wrestling. Paul Heyman, I believe, will be 60 next year. I believe he'll be 60 in 2025. He'll be coming up on, at that point, close to 50 years in the business. He literally got in like his early teens. And we'll get that here. And so Heyman is of course, from New York, Scarsdale, upstate New York, Westchester County, and his father was an attorney, a personal injury lawyer, and a WW2 veteran. His mother was actually a Holocaust survivor. She was legitimately went through that. That was something that really shaped him. I forget who it was with, but he really bonded with somebody over. Todd Gordon, the founder and original owner of ECW. They I don't know if Todd Gordon's family was. I don't know if he had any like immediate family like that was also a victim of the Holocaust, but they bonded very, very strongly over that. And yeah, Heyman wound up talking his way backstage in Madison Square Garden with Vince McMahon Sr. when he was 13 years old, taking pictures. I believe he took pictures from the crowd and then like showed them, somehow wormed his way backstage. One of the things you're going to learn about Paul Heyman is he has the gift of gab. He is somebody that he has that silver tongue. He can work his way in any situation. If he was a Fallout character, I know Fallout's like a big thing now because of the TV series.
Charisma
10.
beat. Yeah.
Charisma
plus
10.
Plus a 10 bonus.
Yeah, 10. And then Charisma 10. Intelligence is probably very high as well.
Yes.
Agility, no. But when he was younger, maybe. So Heyman was very into photography at first, took a lot of pictures. He would take pictures ringside. And this is where, and Stephen Chambers in the chat kind of brought this up. This is where the parallels with Jim Cornette start. And for a while, those two were very intertwined early in their respective careers, where Jim Cornette got started taking pictures in Memphis. He took pictures for Jerry Jarrett's promotion, and Paul Heyman did the same thing for the WWF, taking pictures as a young teenager. And then as he got older, he wound up getting, and this is very funny because of the whole wise man thing. And I don't know if everybody knows the importance and the meaning behind calling Paul Heyman wise man in these promos. And it comes from the three wise men. And the three wise men were the WWF had a system where pretty much every heel, or at least every heel that was getting a push, had a manager. It was just a way, it was just a way that when somebody came in as a heel, because you would come in, they would build you up, you would have a program with a guy on top, and you would cycle out very quickly, unless you were like a Life or like a Killer Kowalski or somebody. So when they wanted to heat somebody up, the way you could get somebody instant heat is you put them with a heel manager. And for the longest time, those three heel managers were Freddie Blassie, Captain Lou Albano, and the Grand Wizard. And they were the three wise men. They were called the three wise men. And two of the three wise men, as Heyman got a little older and was able to drive, they lived in upstate New York, and he had a job actually driving Albano and Blassie to the Madison Square Garden show. So this is a guy who, before his 20th birthday, is getting this experience of kind of sitting at the learning tree with classy Freddie Blassie, who is one of the most successful wrestlers ever and a great manager too, and Captain Lou Albano, who was probably the most over the three wise men as far as Albano was essentially the top heel in WWF in the 70s, or WWF. It was just that they would use him to get somebody heated up for Bruno. And so there's a very legendary story that Heyman told. He told this after Albano died, where Lou Albano was known for, he had a fondness for a drink. He would like an adult beverage or 5 before a show. And 5 is probably a gross understatement. And there's one point where they're going to the Garden. In fact, he would be so drunk, he would get in arguments with Vince Sr., quit, and then have to beg for his job back on a routine basis. So they're going to the Garden, and the captain is 3 sheets to the wind, and they're in the middle of the street in New York City, and Albano just starts peeing. He starts peeing in the middle of the street. And as
at that point in time in New York, he's probably not the only one.
At that point in time, at any point in time in New York City. At any point in time. So Heyman clocks these 2 cops coming their way, and he's like, oh no, the captain's getting arrested. And Blassie sees it too, and Blassie provides coverage of, hey, classy Freddie Blassie, Hollywood fashion plate, how are you? Like glad handing with the cops, and the cops are all talking to Blassie, and they were like, is that the captain? And they're pushing by, and Heyman's like, oh no, we're dead. We're doomed. And they just wanted to meet Captain Lou Albano. They looked, if they saw what happened, they looked the other way, and the captain got off scot-free. So
Do you think he shook their hand?
probably.
Yeah, that was
Probably.
that was an unwashed captain.
Oh
yeah.
That was you had the little captain stank on that thing. So Heyman's doing that. He's doing a lot of photography. He is getting a little deeper in that. He also started writing in the 80s for a lot of wrestling magazines. There's
now the Grand Wizard, is that based on the Grand Wizard that we would think about, or is it what was that derived from?
Probably not. The Grand Wizard was actually a Jewish man, Ernie Roth. The Grand Wizard he originally came to fame in the Detroit area as Abdul Farouk. He was the manager for the original Sheik, and he did really well with that. And then he wound up going to the WWF and becoming the Grand Wizard. The Grand Wizard would wear very loud suits. He would wear a turban, sunglasses. And if you've ever heard Father James Mitchell, if you've ever heard, Genie Turban, like the Great Tiger from Punch-Out.
Yeah.
And if you've ever heard Father James Mitchell do promos, the manager who's mostly in TNA, he was a Sinister Minister in ECW as well. His whole, I'm not saying he ripped off the Grand Wizard, but his
very inspired.
His tone of voice, his way of speaking is very, very reminiscent of the Grand Wizard, who would talk like that.
Is that the guy who was doing drugs on TV for TNA?
Yeah, the guy who did
NWA or whatever.
Yeah, James Mitchell. But the Grand Wizard was a very influential manager and somebody that he was one of the three wise men, a long time, very successful manager in wrestling. And Heyman kind of learned of these guys, wrote for a slew of different wrestling magazines. Never the After mags, I don't think, but like smaller wrestling magazines. I think he worked for George Napolitano, who was a huge publisher in New York. Worked for smaller things as well. And he also wound up, and this is after this club had its heyday in the 70s, was kind of on the downswing at this point. He wound up working with Studio 54, the legendary Studio 54 in New York, the nightclub. And he wound up getting a wrestle party set up. He had also made friends with Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam Bigelow at this point in 1984, 1985 was training at the Monster Factory. And as much as anybody could, because you don't really have this in pro wrestling, he was like this guy, like everybody was like, no, you got to see this Bigelow kid at the Monster Factory. He's going to be a superstar. Because he was a big, tough-looking guy, a bald head with flames tattooed on it, over 300 pounds, and can do cartwheels. It's like, this guy is a can't miss. Yeah, and well, I don't think anybody was doing moonsaults really back then, but he seemed like he could do pretty much everything. And Heyman became very much a huge promoter of Bigelow, and to the point where at Studio 54, he put together a huge event, Wrestle Party 85. He had Bigelow's debut match. He wound up getting connected with Jim Crockett Jr., who sent Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and a few other people there. They did an award for Flair, I think like Man of the Year, Bam Bam Bigelow's debut. And Bigelow kind of stuck with Heyman and kind of got him to become his manager for a little bit. And they worked in Florida. And in Florida, that's where Paul Heyman becomes Paul E. Dangerously, which is, I will still, if I think of Heyman, I will always kind of go Paulie instead of Paul Heyman. Paulie is going to be my kind of go-to. And that is, Paul E. Dangerously is the one in the gray suit there on the right of the graphic you're showing. That would be more of the Paul E. Dangerously, especially with that cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
That cell phone is the trademark. And there was a Michael Keaton movie called Johnny Dangerously, and because he kind of had that look, that's where the Paul E. Dangerously thing came from. And he had some success early. He wound up eventually getting into Memphis. Jerry Lawler infamously broke his jaw, which I think he said was on purpose with a punch because he didn't like him. And later on, he was in the AWA, and he managed a variation of the Midnight Express in the AWA. Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose, who were part of the original Midnight Express in Memphis, was Dennis Condrey, Randy Rose, and Norville Austin, who, if you remember, we talked about as being a tag partner of Sputnik Monroe. They were the Black is Beautiful, White is Wonderful tag team. Sputnik Monroe and Norval Austin. But very quickly, Randy Rose kind of fell by the wayside, and then Condrey and Eaton became the Midnight Express. And by 87, 88, the Midnight Express is Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton. It's that later incarnation of the Midnight Express. But Condrey and Rose are in the AWA with Paulie Dangerously as the original Midnight Express. And Paulie is getting a very favorable comparison to Jim Cornette at this point. Cornette is he's like the northern Jim Cornette. And it's a little more like Cornette was like a spoiled mama's boy. He's buying all these wrestlers. His mother's giving him money to buy up all these wrestlers. And Paulie was more of a yuppie. He was like Jim Cornette meets Gordon Gekko from Wall Street. And Wall Street was actually where like he had that big brick mobile phone, like those old cell phones that were fairly like large.
I always got like a Wall Street or like a car salesman from Paulie Dangerously.
Yeah, just
like
the slimy.
Yeah.
He's going to
read the fine print of the contract.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and he would use the phone as a weapon. And so after the AWA run, Crockett, Jim Crockett Promotions, they decide, Dusty Rhodes decides, let's bring these guys in, and we're going to do the original Midnight Express against the new Midnight Express. So they bring in, with a lot of fanfare, they bring in Paulie Dangerously, Dennis Condrey, Randy Rhodes, and they turn the Midnight Express babyface. So now you have Jim Cornette's Midnight Express against Paulie Dangerously's original Midnight Express. And this is a fairly hot feud. And in between these stints, I did miss something that's very important. Shortly before this, for a while, Heyman was working in Memphis and also in Alabama. And that's where he meets Eddie Gilbert. And I don't want to say a whole lot about Eddie Gilbert because Eddie Gilbert could easily be a show into himself. Eddie Gilbert was ahead of his time creatively. And if he had come around 20 years later, he would have been a very successful wrestler because the only thing that was holding him back in the 80s and early 90s was his size. It was the fact that he was under 6 feet tall. And while he was in very good physical condition, he wasn't a steroid monster. And that held him back a bit in the 80s. More so his height. More so his height than anything else. But
was he kind of like a Backlund?
No. Eddie Gilbert always wanted to be Jerry Lawler. But he was Jerry Lawler if Jerry Lawler was kind of almost exclusively a heel. And
I think Ryan Vox just claimed dibs on the Eddie Gilbert episode.
Eddie Gilbert is a very, very famous, very, very well-renowned, and I don't want to say forgotten, but because he never had that big run with the WWF, and he did have a run with the NWA, but it was more of when he came over from the UWF. The UWF, he had a great run as a heel. It was part of a very famous angle with Bill Watts and the Russians. And he was booking in Alabama and brought in Heyman, and they had a lot of creative success there. But
that checks out.
But then when Heyman goes to the NWA, I think Gilbert is there around the same time too. That is where he really gets into this whole thing of this feud with Cornette. Cornette has a tennis racket. Paulie Dangerously has a cell phone. Very famously, Paul Heyman used the cell phone on Jason Hervey, who was a famous actor at the time. He was the older brother of Fred Savage on the Wonder Years in the 1980s. And yeah, there it is. Heyman would do we
got to bring Stephen Shamans in our episode with you. Like,
yeah,
Stephen knows his stuff.
The Heyman or Paulie would have an interview segment called The Danger Zone. The Danger Zone was like his Piper's Pit. And I think they did a Clash of the Champions or something like that where Jason Hervey was on the Danger Zone and he wound up smashing him over the head with the phone because Jason Hervey was around a little bit because he was dating Missy Hyatt. Missy Hyatt had, I think, broken up with Eddie Gilbert at that time. Eddie Gilbert was one of the many dalliances, one of the more serious dalliances that Missy Hyatt had. She came into the business through another wrestler, Hollywood John Tatum. And then, but I think she had the closest relationship with Eddie Gilbert, and I
She,
believe
she
they were
also
married
brought
for a
in
bit.
she brought in Buff Bagwell, didn't she? Missy
She
Hyatt.
dated Buff Bagwell for a little bit, yeah.
Like she's the one who broke him in. Like she's seen him and she's like, "You should be a wrestler. Like you have a good look."
Yeah, she dated. She briefly dated Jim Kelly from the Buffalo Bills.
Okay.
She dated Rod Brindamore from the Philadelphia Flyers, hockey player. But I believe that the Missy Hyatt and Eddie Gilbert were married. She may have also been married to John Tatum for a moment. But
Gotcha.
Missy, Eddie Gilbert, Paulie Dangerously, all of these people are in the NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, in 1988. And the Midnight Express angle kind of comes and goes, and there's an infamous tuxedo match at Great American Bash 89, which is an amazing pay-per-view. There's a tuxedo match with Jim Cornette and Paulie Dangerously that is better than any right it has to be, because they actually have some psychology behind it. I think Cornette's hurt, but they still have a really good match. They work his knee injury into the match. And then after that kind of fizzles out, and Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose leave. Randy Rose, one of them actually left before the blow-off match. Was like the loser of the fall has to leave, and Jack Victory winds up being a part of it. But then after that, for a little while, Paulie Dangerously managed Mean Mark Callis, who would of course go on to become the Undertaker. But he was a singles wrestler with Paulie before he became a skyscraper. And then he kind of for a little bit, he winds up being phased into more of a commentary role. Commentary, interviewer, works a lot with Jim Ross, works with Gordon Soley. I think he was in and out a little bit. So he was a commentator for about a year and a half, 2 years there. Until 1991. In 1991, there's a lot of turmoil in the NWA. At this point, it's WCW. Jim Crockett has sold the company in late 1988. They kind of floated between the NWA and the WCW name, but by 1991, it is firmly WCW. They don't call them the champion's not the NWA champion anymore. Jim Crockett has nothing to do with the company. Dusty Rhodes has nothing to do with the company. Actually, Dusty Rhodes is kind of on his way back, but he's on his way back halfway.
Mm-hmm.
By 91, Dusty's still in. No, Dusty came back in 91. I was a little confused on the dates here myself. But
by the way, BP's freestyling this whole thing.
Yeah, there's no notes here.
There's no notes. I just want to.
So if I'm stammering, I apologize.
I want to tip the hat a little bit. BP is 100% freestyling this. I love this guy.
So this is where we get into where Paulie really comes into his own. And this is in 1991. Ric Flair leaves. Ric Flair is gone, and he's in the WWF. And now we need to kind of do whatever we can to make people forget the Four Horsemen, which is hard. Arn Anderson's around, but Ric Flair's gone. Tully Blanchard's gone. Ole Anderson's backstage. He was actually booking for a little bit, and then Dusty came in. So one of the people they're getting in, because he had some disputes with Vince, is Ravishing Rick Rude. So at Halloween Havoc 1991, the WCW Halloween Phantom it comes in, and it's Rick Rude, and that slowly begins the formation of one of my personal favorites. You're too kind. One of my personal favorites, the Dangerous Alliance. So the Dangerous Alliance is the dominant stable from 1991 into like early mid 1992 in WCW. And what a group this is. The Dangerous Alliance consists of Ravishing Rick Rude, who was the leader, the centerpiece. The young up-and-comer is the TV champion at the time, goes by the name of Stunning Steve Austin. And then your tag team is Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton. And then your kind of veteran presence is Larry Zbyszko. That's a stable. And not only do you have Paulie Dangerously as your manager, he has his director of covert operations, Medusa. So Dangerous Alliance is thumbs up. Dangerous Alliance is an incredible stable.
Dangerous Alliance versus Bloodline. Who wins that matchup?
Whoever they booked to win. I hate that question. I never like that. Whoever they booked to win it.
Usos versus Arn and Tully.
It's Arn and Bobby Eaton.
Arn and Bobby Eaton. Roman versus. Do you put Roman versus? You got to put it versus Rick.
The figurehead would be Roman against Rick Rude.
And then like
if you're doing it that way, it'd be Roman against Rick Rude. Yeah, Usos against Anderson and Eaton. Solo against
Stunning Steve.
Stunning Steve,
Yikes.
and then Zbyszko against like Sami Zayn, I guess.
Sure.
Zbyszko want to turn a babyface too. And no, you do all 5 and you put it in the War Games, because as Ryan Box in the chat, best War Games ever. I'm always back and forth between that one and the one from 91. I am a huge Brian Pillman fan, so I have a very soft spot for the 91 War Games.
I'll tell you what, we have a War Game shaping up that looks like it's going to be pretty interesting this year.
Yeah, we do.
Bloodline Wolfpack versus Bloodline.
But 1992 is a huge year for the Dangerous Alliance. Rick Rude is probably the I mean, Vader is your top heel in the company at that point. Vader's kind of running through people. But Austin is, and he's so different than Stone Cold. He's just a cocky heel, long blonde hair, just almost a completely different wrestler. But Heyman and Austin just say they learned so much from Rick Rude. They learned so much from Rick Rude. And Rick Rude was at the top of his game here. I love Vader, but you could have made an argument that Rick Rude should have been your world champion. He was the U.S. champion for most of this run. But yeah, Rick Rude was the man.
God love Lily. She's still new. Yes, Austin had long flowing.
He had long flowing blonde hair. In fact, I before I had to go do some stuff today, I was watching. I forget what inspired me to watch this, but I watched. It's one of the worst pay-per-views ever. Great American Bash 1991. I watched the first match, which is a scaffold match between Steve Austin and Terrence Taylor. And Bobby Eaton is on the other side. Bobby Eaton's a babyface. This is pre-Dangerous Alliance. And PN News, who was like a 400-pound big dude. And I like they were so terrified to be on that scaffold. You could capture the flag, so you didn't have to throw anybody off the scaffold. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, it was bad. But that Austin's hair was rocking at that point. And his I believe his second wife, Lady Blossom, was there. That was his manager at the time, his valet. She, I believe, if I'm not crossing up my people, is the person who came up with the term Stone Cold, because she was British and said your tea is getting stone cold. But I might be confusing Austin's first and second wives there. But anyway, we're talking about Paul Heyman, not Steve Austin. So the Dangerous Alliance is a huge, huge deal, but it starts to fizzle out like anything else. There's stunning Steve Austin with the I love the WCW TV title. Look at that hair. For both those guys, look at that hair.
Yikes.
And Steve Austin was that guy. Like, Steve Austin was the blue chip prospect. Steve Austin was like almost like an Austin Theory of his time, except a lot better. Like Steve Austin, he says like he needed to come into his own. He was good from the start. He was really good. But they fizzle out, and Bill Watts takes over WCW through the middle of 1992. And Bill Watts fired Heyman in 1993. And the allegation that was made that he was like falsifying expense reports or something, but it was never really proven. And Heyman sued WCW for wrongful termination, and he quoted ethnic discrimination. Bill Watts was kind of very loose-lipped, especially about like controversial topics. So I wouldn't be surprised if an ethnic slur may have found its way out of his mouth. But when Paulie Dangerously leaves WCW, he is kind of a man without a country. He doesn't go to Vince. He goes to Jim Crockett Jr. We had a relationship now. By 1993, he's had a relationship with Jim Crockett Jr. for 8 years, going back to that Studio 54 thing. And Jim Crockett, it's been 5 years since he sold to Ted Turner, and he had a 5-year non-compete in that contract for the sale of Jim Crockett Promotions, and it's over. So Jim Crockett was talking about putting something together called the World Wrestling Network. And it never really got off the ground, but Paulie Dangerously was going to be his booker. Paulie was going to be the kind of Jim Crockett's Dusty Rhodes for the World Wrestling Network. And I think all they ever really did for the WWN was one set of tapings in New York, and they never really did anything else. But at the time, there's a little company in Philadelphia that's starting to gain a small following, especially locally, called Eastern Championship Wrestling.
Yeah,
they run out of a Eastern Championship Wrestling. They run out of a little. They always say a bingo hall, but it was more than that. They ran out of a. There's this thing in Philadelphia called the Mummers. The Mummers are they do a big New Year's Day parade, and they like the suit Jason Kelsey, where the people that came out with Seth Rollins at WrestleMania, they're the Mummers. And there's a group of the members called the South Philadelphia Vikings. And that was their hall. That's where they stored all their props for their parade stuff. That is where they would do bingo to raise money. You could rent out the hall if you had a wedding reception, or if you were trying to raise money for somebody. They would do like beef and beers and stuff there. But it was Viking Hall, which would later be known as the ECW Arena. Mike Schmidt's Sports Bar was before that. Mike Schmidt's Sports Bar was where they originally ran. They ran a lot of other places. They ran at a club called Pulsations, which was a huge nightclub in Delaware County that had seen better days at that point. They did a TV taping at Cabrini College, which is I think they're wrapping up now. They're going defunct as a university, but they did a TV taping in Cabrini College, and almost nobody showed up because there was a gigantic blizzard the day of the TV taping. It was like 2 feet of snow, but they did settle into the Viking Hall as their home base, where it's still called the ECW Arena to this day. So, Paul Heyman gets on the radar of ECW because Todd Gordon owns it, and his head booker, the guy who is kind of putting all his shows together, is Eddie Gilbert. And Eddie Gilbert wants to bring in Paul Heyman basically to assist with booking and to be a manager and to help produce interviews, essentially, because Paulie was known for being a great interview guy. And a lot of this because I read Todd Gordon's book last year, a lot of this is going to be kind of his side of the story, and Heyman's side of the story as well. But basically, Paul told Todd Gordon, I don't want you to pay me any money, but just so you know, I'm here scouting wrestlers for Crockett. And Gilbert and Gordon wound up becoming on the outs. There was a lot of fighting there. And unfortunately, Eddie Gilbert, shortly after that, wound up in Puerto Rico, where he passed away later that year. He was only 33 years old. So then after Eddie Gilbert was on the outs, Todd Gordon made Paul Heyman the booker. Now, Gordon claims a lot of the creative stuff he was still doing, but Paul was the guy who was always facing the talent. Like, Todd's your money guy, I'm the creative guy, was essentially the division of labor there. And he was a manager. He managed Sabu, he managed 911, and they wound up having a deal with the NWA, and obviously that goes away when Shane Douglas throws the belt down. That's when they become Extreme Championship Wrestling. And by the 90s, or by like 1995 or so, that is when Paul Heyman becomes the owner of ECW. And Todd Gordon is still around, but Paulie is the owner. And there's some people say Paulie bought him out. Essentially, Todd Gordon is kind of alleged that Paulie kind of screwed him out of it, for lack of a better term. Like, Todd was kind of out of money. They had made these TV deals where they were buying time on like MSG Network in New York and Sunshine Network in Florida, and they were losing so much money that eventually it was just like, just take on the debt. Just take on the debt. I'm out. And he wasn't out, like, he was still an on-screen character. He was still doing a lot of stuff there, but in 1995 it becomes Paul Heyman's company.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. You have to realize this guy has been around since he's 14.
Yeah,
and around Vince Sr., and then works his way.
Yeah,
works in that territory and probably is just soaking up as much knowledge as he can, and then goes down south and deals with like dudes like Jerry Lawler breaking his jaw, and like, you know what I mean, like going through it, you know what I mean? Because like, we're only on a small independent wrestling scale. This like and sees some stuff. Like, this guy is just soaking it in. Goes to WCW, probably thinks that's his lifer. Gets taken out from there, and then sees this company and sees the talent and goes, I can run this.
And sees that it's starting to get a small cult following, and he's just going to throw gas on that fire. And they did a great job. Like, Heyman and Gordon, no matter what you want to say, they did a great job of turning that into ECW. Changed wrestling forever. Like, there's no Attitude Era without ECW. There's
a lot of wrestling today is, I mean, during the Hall of Fame speech, he's like, if you think ECW is dead, you can suck my dick. You know what I mean? Like, it ain't dead.
I'll go so far as to say there's a chance that without ECW, WCW wins.
Yeah,
WCW wins because that attitude, the Attitude Era was ECW's playbook on WWF's budget. That was the Attitude Era. That is.
Do you believe in the theory or the rumor that WWE was essentially giving ECW money to stay afloat, to send Well, I mean, like for a while there, people were like, it didn't happen. It did happen. But
Oh, it
like,
100% happened.
yeah.
Here's the way it happened. This is Heyman's version of events.
If I'm jumping too far ahead, you can
No,
just
no,
tell
no.
me.
You're
We'll get
you're
there in a
fine.
second.
You're
Yeah.
fine. We're moving in that direction because
Yeah.
ECW is growing. It's getting this cult following, and Paul Heyman very, very early on opens up some back channels with Vince McMahon, and Paul Heyman says that Vince never funded ECW, but he paid Paulie as a consultant, and then Paulie would use that money to fund ECW. So there's like a little workaround. There's a little workaround.
And the fact that he became so good with talent and respected by talent and seeing things that other companies weren't in talent, like he just cherry picked rejects essentially that people thought weren't good enough to be on their TV and built ECW with it.
Like Shane Douglas. Shane Douglas is Sabu was just he was really famous in Japan, and he was like he had gotten tryouts other places, but nobody really wanted to deal with Sabu, and his style, like the mainstream wrestling, especially the WWF, wasn't ready for a guy whose whole gimmick is he's suicidal, homicidal, genocidal. He goes through tables and stuff like that. Like WCW tried with Sabu in '95 and it didn't work. But there were some other things like I believe Heyman said they were getting money from Def Jam Records to play music for Too Cold Scorpio. Like there was a music licensing thing or that there was something with Too Cold Scorpio where, I think they were getting like $1,000 a week for from Def Jam Records or something like that. But essentially, like their shows, like the old ECW TV shows, a lot of your commercials were for ECW. It was like ECW tickets. It was buy this ECW videotape. It was basically they were selling their own product. And as you get into the later 90s, like 96, 97, that's when you start to see that the Monday Night War is in full swing, and WWF starts to rely on ECW more as a kind of breeding ground for people. Like they would send people down there to learn. They would send people down there to develop. It was like a proto-developmental. They would send them to Memphis. They would send them to ECW.
And it's wild that like now we watch wrestling, and if Tony Khan goes on TV and says something about WWE, you're like, you don't do that. Oh no, that's terrible. How can you
fun?
take
Stop it. That
If
was the best part of the 90s.
You can't take shots at other companies.
Sure
Just
you
worry
can.
about your own company. Paul Heyman would put storylines of Mick Foley wearing WCW shirts, and they made fun of the BWO. Like ECW was founded on saying F the mainstream products and openly saying it.
Shane Douglas would call out Ric Flair every show. Dick Flair, I challenge you to come here. Like, there was, and Heyman was smart enough. Heyman was smart enough to know that Vince was respected by his audience more than Eric Bischoff was. Like, they didn't like WWF. WWF was cartoonish. WWF was a circus. It was for kids. This is for adults. We like this better. But they at least respected Vince. They hated Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff was this Ken doll, smiling, empty suit that we hated. ECW versus Jakar, those are two very different styles. Those are two very different styles.
Real quick, let's entertain that. Let's book a card. Let's book an ECW versus Shakara card.
Well, you kind of got you almost have to do Tommy Dreamer against Eddie Kingston as your main event. That's got to be your main event. But that is, you can star that. And then you can look at like, okay, the guys who would you put Van Dam against? Like there's so many like athletic people like Fire Ant, Van Dam and Fire Ant, or Van Dam and Sabu against the Colony. You can do.
Okay.
Van Dam and Sabu against the Colony. There you go. The Dudley Boys against Los Ice Creams. Just because
Dudley Boys versus the Hollow Wicked, Ultramanus.
Oh,
and
the Spectral. You could do that. You could do that.
Claudio versus
that's who I was kind of stuck on. Jerry Lynn is this because that would be an amazing match.
Yeah,
Claudio against Jerry Lynn. That would be your match of the night. Yeah,
there's so many good ones.
Jazz against Sarah Del Rey. If you're gonna put a women's match in there, Jazz against Sarah Del Rey is your women's match. Or
well, Orange wasn't really a Chikara guy. He was
Fire Ant.
He was Fire Ant under Chikara.
Okay.
Sorry, we don't know who the Fire. Yeah.
I don't know who that Soldier Ant was either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be a
that'd
fun
a lot of
card.
fun.
That we already booked the fantasy war games with Paul Heyman stable, but ECW versus Chikara, that'd be crazy.
And as we get into like 96, 97, ECW's big push is pay-per-view. We need to get pay-per-view. We need to like that's the next step in building this.
But real
is
quick, and it's
pay-per-view.
funny he brings up Chikara is because Chikara filled that void that was missing for a long time in the Philadelphia
Yeah.
area. You know what I mean? Like,
Not really. Not really.
no, you don't think Chikara had that
No.
cult following that an ECW kind of had in the city of Philadelphia?
It did for a second. It did for a second, but after ECW goes away, I think even though it's a completely different product, but then again, so was Chikara. What popped up to fill the void of ECW was Ring of Honor.
Yeah, it's a good call. That's a good
Ring
call.
of Honor
Yeah.
was Ring of Honor is the one that really was super successful. They existed before ECW, but as far as that hardcore ultra violent thing, CZW.
Yeah.
Because before ECW went belly up, they were mainly running out of Jersey. And then when ECW kind of went away,
and I mean, and GCW is essentially trying to be the modern day
yeah.
ECW.
That was the rest for CZW. Like,
yeah,
that's where a lot of those guys. That's where Nick Gage started. That's
Yeah.
where a lot of their guys started. But CZW was kind of the theme successor as far as successor of ECW. In fact, I think to this day, CZW has run more events in ECW arena than in 2300 arena than any other company, including ECW.
I see some old CZW stuff that I've never known existed, like popping up on my timeline. They were crazy.
Yeah. And there were so many different eras of that because I'm talking about like 2001. Like John Zandig, CZW, not DJ Hyde, CZW. No disrespect to either one of them, but just like the immediate aftermath of Nick Gage, Justice Payne, the Backseat Boys, all those people that were really kind of putting them on the map. And then XPW comes in and there's that big war. XPW for a few months has exclusivity over the ECW arena. And now you're kind of seeing XPW up on the radar again. Ring of Honor's coming up. 3PW was one that was around for a little bit. That was the Blue Meanie. And at that point, he was in a relationship with Jasmine St. Clair, the adult film actress. And they started a company called 3PW, which was more of the kind of where CZW kind of had the violence of ECW. 3PW had a little bit more of the essence of we're going to use a lot of old ECW guys and have that ECW kind of more feel.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when Superman died and you had the Man of Steel and you had the Cyborg Superman and you had Superboy and you had the other Superman with the glasses.
It just you can't shake a stick in the Northeast area and not have someone who's inspired because of the ECW and Paul Heyman. Yeah, because
at that point, Chikara's around. At that point, they're just getting started as a wrestling school, but they're not running Philly really. They're running like Hellertown. They're running up more closer to like the not quite the Lehigh Valley, but like they're running Hellertown. They
ran some school county shows.
Yeah,
they were in like Pottsville and like Port Clinton, Port Carbon, and places like that.
Yeah, they're running more toward like more up this way, more in Northeast Pennsylvania or very far East Pennsylvania. They're not running Philly. They would run Philly later. They would do a lot of shows at the arena later. They do King of Trios there. But that was when CZW kind of is down on a little bit of a downswing. 3PW didn't last very long. Ring of Honor at that point, Ring of Honor at that point is mainly just running TV in Philly. They would film their TV there when they were on HDNet. But Ring of Honor kind of shifted their big shows to New York. They would run, because I was living up there at the time. They were running they would run North Jersey and Edison, Inman Sports Center. They would run the Manhattan Center, which was where they used to tape Monday Night Raw. They would run the Hammerstein Ballroom for really big shows. So Ring of Honor became more of a touring company, less of a Philly specific company.
Yeah.
So that's when Chikara slides in. Chikara slides in kind of like the 2006, 2007 time, like the mid 2000s, and really kind of fills the void of CZW kind of entering a lull period, 3PW not really lasting very long, and Ring of Honor becoming more of a touring company.
Yeah.
That's the void that Chikara fills.
To shift gears back to ECW, are they the ones who you say put Hammerstein on the map?
For a wrestling venue, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a legendary concert venue. Like I know one time, Ring of Honor, I went to a Ring of Honor show at the Manhattan Center, and as you're leaving, the Manhattan Center is a huge complex in New York City, And when you say the Manhattan Center, and like you think about Raw, you're really talking about a building called the Grand Ballroom, which is at the top of the Manhattan Center. And the Hammerstein Ballroom is on the other side. And I think one time while Ring of Honor was in the Grand Ballroom upstairs, there was like a Disturbed concert going on in the Hammerstein. I remember one time I went to a Ring of Honor show at the Hammerstein Ballroom, and there's all this security. This is like 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. There's all this security. Like it was raining. You had to check your umbrella. You had to, if you had a coat, you couldn't have your coat on. You had to leave it at in the front. There was like pat downs and stuff. Like, what the hell's going on here? It turns out that as there's wrestling going on and the Hammerstein up in the smaller Grand Ballroom upstairs, Madonna is doing dress rehearsals of her upcoming concert tour.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But yeah, ECW was the first one to do, like, they would do a lot of pay-per-views at the Hammerstein, and then the one night stands were very famous. But the first pay-per-view, kind of looping it back, there were some controversial incidents. The mass transit thing, they had a fire chair incident where a fan got burned at a show, and then the Sandman got crucified at the same show, and Kurt Angle was supposed to sign with ECW, and he walked out and said never.
It's like not a chance.
And so finally, they get their pay-per-view in 1997, and again, and Paulie and Vince, or ECW and WWE, are kind of a little tight-knit at this point. They would bring people in, like Brockus was a guy that WWF was trying to, at the time, WWF was trying to really build up. He came to ECW for a little bit. Darren Drozdoff, I believe, was there for a little bit. Al Snow kind of reinvented himself. He was signed by WWE, but they sent him to ECW, and that's where the head gimmick started. He started doing that in ECW before it was ever in the WWF.
Real quick, when did you become aware of ECW? Or
early.
how?
It was early on. So in 1993, I briefly lived in the state of Delaware. And in 1993, I moved back to Pennsylvania from Delaware, and I lived in Delaware County, which is right outside of Philly. That's where I'm from. And there was a channel called Sports Channel Philadelphia. And they would show like Phillies games, Flyers games, Sixers games. It was the forerunner to right now Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia, or NBC Sports Philadelphia. Before that existed, there was a channel called Sports Channel Philadelphia. And just flipping through channels, I was very, very good at finding wrestling. I just flipped through channels. Oh, wrestling, I'm in. And in 1993, flipping through channels, there's wrestling, and I see like Road Warrior Hawk is there, and Eddie Gilbert's there, and I know Eddie Gilbert because the year before that, Eddie Gilbert was in a company called the Global Wrestling Federation, or maybe it was even 1991, which was out of Texas, and they were on ESPN. Actually, they were on ESPN too, and Eddie Gilbert was one of their big stars for like the first couple of months before they all ran out of money. And so Eddie Gilbert's there, and then you see this crazy guy Sabu, and so ECW is on my radar in 1993, which is fairly early on in their existence, because there was a company before that called the Tri-State Wrestling Association, maybe Alliance, TWA. I always known it was TWA, and they would run shows, pretty big indie shows in Philly. They would draw some big crowds, but again, they ran out of money. And Todd Gordon kind of came on as an investor in Tri-State Wrestling, and the guy who ran it, Joel Goodhart, just it went belly up. He had a radio show on the sports radio station in Philly, and like the week before a show, he said, "Yep, the show's canceled," and it was supposed to be Buddy Rogers and Buddy Landell in the Battle of the Nature Boys, and it never happened. But he kind of also skipped town with the pre-sale tickets, and that is why, to this day, if you're in Pennsylvania, you have to post that $10,000 bond for promoting a wrestling event. It's a Joel Goodhart rule. So,
real quick for me, I had a friend, we talked wrestling, and he was older than me. Our moms worked together, and he was always like, "Bro, you gotta watch, like, you love wrestling." And he goes, "Why do you watch this and this and this?" I go, "Bro." So I was like Rudy's dad. I was like, in this house, there's only one football team that plays, and that's the WWE. Like, I was like the Rudy guy. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't watch anything else. The only time I really ever consumed WCW at all was because of the N64 video games, WCW versus WCW Nitro and World Tour. It's the only reason I consumed WCW is because those games were so good. But I didn't know who I was playing as. I was just like, this game is fantastic. It's a really fun wrestling game to play with your friends. And that was the only exposure I had to WCW. I didn't watch it. So
See, I was if I found wrestling, I'm watching the wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's ECW, WCW, WWF, Global. It
yeah,
doesn't matter
I
if
was
it's wrestling. I'm
very
there.
brand specific. I'm glad I have grown out of that, and I wish more wrestling fans wouldn't be that way, because I'm watching people now who are like, I only watch WWE. I'm like, you're missing out, man.
Yeah,
This point in time in wrestling, if you're only watching one and you say you love this business, you are doing a huge disservice to yourself. But
I agree.
this kid was like, yo, there's this thing called ECW, it's extreme and it's real. And I was like, what
Oh,
do
you
you
would
mean
always
it's
hear that.
real? Yeah, and like, it's real, bro. Like they're doing this, and this. It's 100%. It's not like WWE. It's real. And I was like, and I'm young, and I was like, all right, this he's a mark. You know, I'm like, what an
Yeah.
idiot. And I remember turning it on, and the first thing I see is like a Dudley Boys Falls Count Anywhere match, and Bubba is holding somebody by their hair, and he's just taking a cheese grater across his
Yep.
forehead, and there's just blood pour. I was like, I think this is real.
It allowed you to suspend that disbelief for a little bit.
It did.
especially if you were younger.
It got me. It got me.
And
Yeah.
there were always urban legends like, oh, if you go to an ECW show, you have to sign a release. You have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
You have
all that
to,
was fed to me.
Yeah, like there were always those tall tales about it. And they had a great propensity for getting people to actually believe their angles too.
Yeah.
And two of them in particular. The angle with the Sandman being blinded, that they did that so well, and the Sandman did a great job of it too, where they had a match with Dreamer and Sandman, where Sandman has a cigarette and Dreamer like goes to push him in the face, and the cigarette goes in Sandman's eye, and they treat it like it's legit. Like Sandman's retiring, and he walked around like everywhere with like bandages over his face for like a month to sell it. And then in the retirement ceremony, when Dreamer turns his back, he rips the bandages off and just busts him over the head with a cane.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think some people actually kind of believe, maybe not a lot of people, but they did it the exact right way, where when they brought in Bill Alfonso to kind of tone things down a little bit, as they brought in Bill Alfonso saying that ECW has gotten too out of control, and Bill Alfonso has been appointed by the State Athletic Commission, and he has to cool down ECW. And I think people really bought it. I think people thought like,
never let that athletic commission into your shows. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you do let them in, you break their jaw.
Too soon. But ECW by 1997 is trying to get pay-per-view. They finally get it. By 1997, they're finally gonna have Barely Legal, which is their first pay-per-view from the ECW arena. And WWF is on the ropes. They're getting their ass beat by WCW in the Monday Night War. They're in trouble. The NWO is in full swing. WWF is looking for something, anything. Heyman is helping consultancy wise. And they had a show called Live Wire, and he calls in as Bruce from Connecticut. And he's like just yelling at people there. He's yelling at Vince Russo. I think it was Vic Venom at the time. And by 1997, they do a thing where ECW is going to invade Raw. Raw's at the Manhattan Center. So ECW shows up. Jerry Lawler was doing a back and forth feud with ECW. He would show up at the arena. He actually, him and Cornette showed up one time because Cornette and Heyman really didn't like each other at this point. Going back to the NWA thing where Shane Douglas threw down the NWA World title, the guy they really screwed was Dennis Corluzzo, who was the NWA promoter out of New Jersey, and Jim Cornette was very friendly with Corluzzo, and there was bad blood between Cornette and Heyman forever. But Lawler and Cornette showed up one time, and I remember, I think it was Lawler hit Tommy Dreamer with the Sandman's cane and caught him and ruptured his testicle. So very painful injury there. But they do a thing on Raw where the BWO shows up. Rob Van Dam starts showing up as Mr. Monday Night. There was a little bit of working back and forth and like an ECW versus WWF feud throughout 1997. But what's happening is when WWF really starts to come up in 1998 and Austin's taken off and The Rock's taken off and wrestling as a whole is taking off, because by 98, like WCW is still going pretty strong. Like they're starting to lose steam a little bit, but 98, both companies are really, really going strong, and the war is in full swing. And what that did, and this is great for the boys, is it rose. There were bidding wars for people. And if you couldn't steal somebody from WWF or WCW, oh, let's get a guy from ECW. So ECW had to start paying their talent more to keep them around. And it just wound up becoming that bubble got so big that Paul Heyman couldn't fund it anymore. And they weren't making enough money to fund it. And that's why ECW gets into financial trouble. They say by the time that they were at the end of their rope in like 2001. They get a show on TNN for a little bit, but TNN was just kind of using them as a test case because they really wanted to get WWF. And in 2001, they do make the deal to get their 2000 or 2001. I believe 2000 is when Raw went from USA to TNN, and then later it was Spike TV. And they also got kind of screwed out of some video game royalties. They had two video games actually, Hardcore Revolution and Anarchy Rules, and the publisher of the video games was Acclaim, and Acclaim went out of business. So they were supposed to get royalties on those video games that they never got because Acclaim went belly up. You didn't get the pay-per-view money right away. So by the time ECW closes down in 2001, they have $7 million in debt, but they were owed $3 million in pay-per-view money, but still, they were still $4 million in the hole.
Mhm.
And Heyman had kind of checked out at that point. The other thing that happens in 2001, I know we're going long. I'm going to try to shorten this up here a little bit. In 2001, Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross are the voices of WWF. And Jerry Lawler is dating Stacey Carter at the time, who was the Cat in WWF, and she got fired. She got fired in February of 2001, and basically Jerry Lawler stood up for her and said, "Hey, look, if she goes, I'm gone too." And they're like, "Okay, Jerry, sorry to hear that, but you're done." And so when Jerry Lawler leaves, Paul Heyman joins Jim Ross in the commentary booth, and it's the first time he's done commentary regularly since the early 90s in WCW. And Heyman has that going on. He also was in a movie at that time. They did a remake of the movie Rollerball, and he was the announcer for Rollerball. So he's in California trying to get work as an actor, and he's at Raw every Monday while ECW is just dying. Like Tommy Dreamer was the one that was really kind of taking over ECW at that point and running the day-to-day. And Tommy Dreamer was trying to put funding together to buy it. Like, I think he had set up something with I think a company's called like Rainbow Sports or something like that. And they were going to put together a deal to buy ECW, but Heyman was like, "No, we're done. We're done." And that's why Dreamer was like so distraught, they say. And Dreamer himself has admitted this, that he says, and I don't know if he really meant it or not, but this is what he claims. He says that there was a point where he was going to go to WrestleMania X7, WrestleMania 17, where Paul Heyman was announcing with Jim Ross. He said he was going to hop the rail with a gun, and he was going to shoot Paul Heyman in the head and then shoot himself in the head. Like, that's how distraught he was at ECW going away.
I mean, when you think of like angles in ECW, right? There's always the extreme violent angles. There's always their extreme violent moments. But like going back and rewatching it, because I remember a lot of people speaking so highly of it. Like when you have those dusty moments and you have those like come up moments, or that moment where like you had your Mikey Whipwreck, which was another big one. But like the Tommy Dreamer taking the Singapore cane and just kept taking it and taking it to the point where the crowd's like the crowd's begging you to stop. Like Tommy was like, when I thought ECW, I immediately
he was the heart and soul,
I put Tommy Dreamer as the guy of ECW.
And more so even that, Dreamer and Raven was who's. And I know we were talking about like the things before, and I don't know if I don't think I would do Dudley Boys and I would do Raven's Flock against the Spectral.
Well, because I seen Raven in ECW made me interested when Raven's Flock went to WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, I like this guy. Like I was into Raven because of ECW.
Yeah. So when ECW goes away, Paul Heyman goes to WWF first as an announcer, and then the announcing thing kind of ends when Lawler comes back. So when Lawler's gone, that's when WWF buys WCW. They're doing the invasion, and WWF was one of the creditors for ECW. ECW owed WWF a lot of money. I don't know if they took out loans or what the deal was, but WWF was one of the people who, when ECW went bankrupt, were one of the people they owed money to. And so they bring in ECW as part of the invasion, where they're saying like Shane McMahon owns WCW, but Stephanie McMahon bought ECW. And now they're the alliance, and they're going to take out WWF and take out Vince. And so Heyman is now the heel announcer with Jim Ross. And he's the voice of the Alliance. He's the voice of WCW and ECW on
It was
on
wild at
commentary.
one point to see Vince, Eric Bischoff, and Paul Heyman on the screen at one time.
Yeah,
on a
Bischoff
Monday Night
isn't there
Raw.
yet.
But I'm
Bischoff
saying
isn't
like
there
later
yet.
on, it was like,
Yeah.
this is on TV right now.
Mhm.
Like, it's bonkers. That's bonkers.
Yep. And then when the invasion ends in November of 2001, Paul Heyman is fired. Like all the WCW and ECW people are fired in storyline. And then Jerry Lawler is coming back at that point because after he quit his job over Stacey Carter, about 3 or 4 months later, Stacey Carter dumped him. So that happened. And so hat in hand, actually one of the things he did while he was not in there, like because WCW closed down, Jimmy Hart and Hulk Hogan and Brian Knobbs put together tapings for this thing called the XWF. And you can find these on YouTube. And they just basically shot a few episodes as a pilot, but nobody ever picked it up. And the commentary team, and this is a unique team, the commentary team for the XWF is Tony Schiavone and Jerry the King Lawler. It's a very unique team. Because Lawler didn't do a whole lot of commentary outside of WWF or WWE. So Heyman,
I loved him as a kid, and as I get older and rewatch old pay-per-views, I can't stand him on
it
commentary.
didn't age well just because of the risque content and the kind of sexism of it.
It was boring. It's kind of boring to listen to as an adult. It's like cheap comedy. It's like like listen, I'm not above it. I'll laugh at a fart joke, but like it's like going back and listen to old Jerry, it's like
compared to like a Bobby Heenan or a Jesse Ventura in their primes, there's no contest.
They're timeless. Like I can listen to them all day.
And so Heyman, I think, was also helping out creatively backstage at this point. And in 2002, Heyman has been off TV since November 2001. And in April of 2002, after WrestleMania 18, the big guy debuting for the WWF the night after WrestleMania in 2002, you may have heard of this guy afterward. He's a guy named Brock Lesnar. And so Brock Lesnar's debut was one of the best debuts ever. There's just this match with like Spike Dudley and a few other people. Brock Lesnar just comes in with Paul Heyman and kills everybody. Like I think Spike or somebody comes off the top rope with a pull cue and breaks over Brock's head. Brock just like kind of cracks his neck and just clotheslines the guy's head.
He does that. He did that move. Or it was actually it was in the video game where he would like,
he
would just lay you
and it came from that moment.
Yeah.
So that is the beginning of a very important relationship, which was Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar. They were put together. Heyman was like a mentor for Brock in pro wrestling, and they became friends. They became genuine friends. So Heyman's being used as a manager, and this is also the time that they're splitting the rosters. Heyman is managing Brock Lesnar, but at the same time, obviously Vince McMahon has the final creative direction over everything. But on the grand scheme of things, Paul Heyman becomes the head writer for SmackDown, and I believe at that point Brian Gewirtz was the head writer for Raw. And so it seems like a golden age of SmackDown because you had what was called the SmackDown 6, where Heyman really pushed out these 6 guys and you just had them have great matches with each other for a year. It was Edge, Christian, Kurt Angle, Edge, Rey Mysterio, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, unfortunately, Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero Jr. And they just had incredible matches throughout 2002, and Brock wound up going over there. But eventually, there's a lot as Stephanie McMahon gets more and more involved in commentary or in creative.
On screen,
She would behind the scenes, like she became the head of creative, and she loved Brian Gewirtz. Like apparently, ex-writers say, why can't you just write it like Brian would write it? And now, of course, Brian Gewirtz is very in tight with The Rock. He works with him. So Heyman and Stephanie butt heads frequently, and Paul Heyman winds up like they just have blow-ups and eventually and Heyman was like the on-screen general manager of SmackDown for a little bit, managed the Big Show for a little bit, because at this point in 2004, 2005, Brock is gone, and Heyman's not really managing anybody. So to kind of get him away from Stephanie because they're at each other's throats, he became the booker of OVW because Jim Cornette. This is around the time that Jim Cornette was pushed out because he hit a guy. Literally, he started hitting Santino Marella, who would have killed him. Yeah, because Santino was like a legit shooter. But Heyman takes over for Cornette and OVW. That's where he meets CM Punk. That's where he becomes friendly with CM Punk. And at this time, they're also doing ECW One Night Stand, which was Rob Van Dam's idea. Just a one-night ECW pay-per-view. It did really well. And I believe the other thing that really made them want to do that ECW One Night Stand was they did a DVD called The Rise and Fall of ECW, which sold amazingly well. amazingly well, which we should have mentioned somewhere along this point. Basically, WWE made a deal to buy the rights to ECW from the people who, the creditors, like the people who ECW owed money to, which was they were one of them. So ECW One Night Stand is a huge success, and so in 2006 they do it again, and then they bring back ECW as a new third brand, like kind of like not quite developmental, but not quite not developmental, and that was a thing that happened, and Paulie was involved a bit creatively, not entirely. His creative power over ECW dwindled very quickly, and to the point where at the end of 2006, when they did that December to Dismember show, where Bobby Lashley beats the Big Show for the ECW title, Heyman's kind of done, and Heyman's out. And Heyman is not just out of ECW; he is out of wrestling. He's out of wrestling for 6 years. He's out for a long time. He winds up doing he ran, I think he still runs a marketing agency, or co-runs a marketing agency in New York called Looking for Larry. But the one kind of thread that he has, maybe, but the one kind of thread he still has with professional wrestling is his friendship with Brock Lesnar. But Brock Lesnar is also long gone from pro wrestling at this point. Brock Lesnar left wrestling at the first point in, I believe, 2004 after WrestleMania 20.
That was his NFL stint, right?
Yeah, it was 2004. Yeah, 2004 after WrestleMania 20. He leaves to go to the Minnesota Vikings, and that doesn't work. He had a few matches in Japan where, like, they basically had like a 7-year non-compete in wrestling, and they're like, that's ridiculous. But he didn't do a lot of wrestling, but he did do MMA, and obviously he goes to UFC, and he is still very tight with Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman, I believe, helped write his book. Paul Heyman was still very involved in his like a lot of the business stuff with Brock. They were always very closely knit together. And that is how he comes back. Heyman comes back when Brock comes back in 2012 as Brock Lesnar's legal advisor. And he's been with WWE kind of ever since.
You know what's a huge missed opportunity? Like, you think about the streak, right? Like the streak ending, and people are still upset by it. But I think it was the right call with Brock Lesnar. I personally do. But could you imagine, in a perfect world, you have Taker and Paul Bear in one corner and Brock and Paul in the other?
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Yeah, that would have been interesting. But unfortunately, at that point, Paul Bear had already passed.
Yeah, like it just, when you think of managers, man, like Paul, I don't know. Well, I'm sure we'll put a button on that towards the end of just like where he stands as the all-time greats.
Yeah, but yeah, that's, I mean, I think we all know what's happened since then. He had that really, really great run with Lesnar. He had a great run with CM Punk when Lesnar was kind of just there sparingly in 2013. They tried with some other guys. Remember, he managed Curtis Axel for a minute. He managed Cesaro for a minute.
Ryback, Big Show.
Ryback, yeah. Big Show was a little earlier than that, but then they really found the niche with Lesnar when Lesnar was coming in more regularly. And he had that wonderful run with Lesnar, which takes us right into the bloodline, which takes us right to now. Going to the Hall of Fame. Definitely recognized by everybody as one of the all-time greats as a manager.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to give Roman his flowers here. His introduction to Paul was great. I thought he, like, him coming up to me like, what do I say for a guy that is the best talker in the world? Like, how did I draw this draw? Like, I thought Roman was really charismatic in that intro to Paul. The speech was unbelievable. It was everything you wanted from Paul Heyman, for his kids, for his business, like kind of showing the three faces. Like, we joked around at the thumbnail, the three faces of Paul Heyman. Like, it was beautiful. It was everything you needed. And I mean, the guy, we're not talking about him as if he's gone, because he's still at the top of his game.
Yeah,
like he's still, like, there's no slowing this guy down.
Like and obviously Roman is the engine because it's Roman, and he's the guy that's actually,
he turned Roman babyface without even Roman being on screen.
Yeah, and but Paul Heyman has always been able to not only keep things interesting through his microphone work, but keep things interesting through his usually anything he's doing on screen, he's having some creative involvement with too. He's like Brock and Roman have kind of been able to write their own tickets with a lot of creative, and to the point now where it's coming out that it looks like the reason that Cody didn't finish the story in LA at WrestleMania 39 is because Roman and Heyman pushed for Roman to win that one and have Cody win at 40.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
yeah,
because the Rock picked up the phone.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of stuff about that too, where I guess there was a point sometime where somebody said like Rock was going to beat Roman and then vacate the title but be the people's champion. It was like, okay, I don't know if that's a great idea.
Dude,
but
that's a whole other conversation. I'm terrified of the Rock. I'm gonna be honest, man. I'm getting Hogan vibes. I'm getting terrified.
He doesn't want to wrestle enough to be Hogan. I will die on the hill that I think Cody winning 39 was the right move, but I feel okay about it because if Cody would have won at 39, I wouldn't have been able to be there for him winning at 40.
Yeah, and honestly, the only thing, and we didn't talk about this, the only thing of that WrestleMania 4, like that ending that I did not like at all, and everyone was saying it's supposed to be Austin, it was supposed to be this, it was supposed to be that. I don't think you need Stone Cold in that. I definitely did not like the Undertaker spot. Like the nostalgia kick doesn't do it for me. Like visually, I feel all the people who were treated by Roman and the Bloodline for 2 years should have been the ones to run off the Bloodline to let them be like, no, we're standing up for Cody. This guy's going to have his moment. Roman's going to have to stand on his own, and have the roster that you're currently pushing and working with every single week be the deciding factor to push away the Bloodline so that moment happens. I think the Undertaker was a giant cop out just to get a nostalgia hit.
I see where you're coming from. I think I do disagree, and it would have been definitely better with Steve Austin, and just because that is the Rock's foil, that is the Joker. The Rock is the Joker to Austin's Batman, and I guess Austin, it came out later, they couldn't come to a deal. I would have thrown in whatever money you needed for that, but I think it would have been that we have John Cena and Steve Austin, the last two flag bearer baby faces of WWE, saying, Cody, it's yours now. And that is something that across generations, across eras of WWE would have been a really good kind of button on that, just because it's not even about like finishing the story as far as Roman's title reign. It's like, no, Cody is the man now. Cody is the next in that line of, and I've had this discussion with people too, of like, there's a difference between being the champion in WWE and being the guy. And sometimes there isn't a guy. Sometimes you just don't have one. But you can follow that lineage of this is the flag bearer. This is the cornerstone that you're building the company around. And I think it very clearly goes from Bruno to Hogan. You didn't have one for a while. Like Brett tried, Shawn tried, Diesel tried, but you didn't really have one for a while. Because from Hogan, the next guy that's like that is Austin. And then you didn't have one.
Taker was there, but he was not. I wouldn't consider him the guy either. He tried.
There's been 5 of them, or 6 of them. I have to count it out. Bruno, Hogan, Austin, Cena, Roman, and possibly now Cody. Time will tell.
You don't put The Rock in there with
wasn't around long enough. Austin barely was around long enough. But Rock became a bigger star outside of wrestling. Within the WWE scope, it was Austin.
Yeah,
Austin is the guy that shot The Rock off. The Rock kept it going. It got The Rock out there a little more, but it was Austin. Like the Attitude Era, it was Austin.
Totally agree. Yeah, I don't hate that at all. All right, so let's do this. Paul Heyman. We always say our Mount Rushmores, right? Is he? I mean, this is a stupid question. Is he on the Mount Rushmores
of managers?
Of managers, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he definitely. The tough spot on Mount Rushmore is number 4, because you make an argument for a lot of guys.
Is Paul 1 or 2?
Paul might be 3. Paul's either 2 or 3. Paul's either 2 or 3 for me. 1 is set in stone. 1 is Bobby Heenan.
Yes.
1 is Bobby Heenan. No discussion. 2 and 3, I go back and forth, and I know you're gonna cringe at this.
I don't hate it.
He's so good. 2 and 3, it fluctuates between Jim Cornette and Paul Heyman. You can give Paul Heyman points for longevity, but if Paul Heyman rose over Jim Cornette, it's because he stood on his shoulders. A lot of Paul Heyman's early managerial work was very inspired by Jim Cornette. And
here's where I'll put Paul over Jim. I feel like when you're in the business and when you're a factor of the business of someone who's been around and has been and done things and has helped pave the way, and then you're no longer on the major brand, and then how you conduct yourself or how you speak about the business and what you contribute to the business after you're gone, I think Paul has done more positive in the business.
Oh,
than
Heyman has said some
Cornette.
very controversial stuff.
I know, but I'm saying,
if
like,
Heyman had a podcast,
Paul,
he would probably be saying a lot of stuff Cornette's saying.
but I'm saying, yeah, maybe, but I think like it's kind of like Sean and Brett. Like Sean is in NXT working. He's and Brett's still upset about getting kicked by Goldberg. You know what I mean? Like it's I respect.
I think that's a gross oversimplification.
But Brett is mostly the time when Brett's speaking about wrestling, he's very bitter and angry.
But that's okay. Who's a better? That's a different question. Who's a better ex wrestler, Sean or Brett? That's a different question. Who did a better job of leading by example as a wrestler? Brett, by far, by far, by far.
I think they were both little cunts at some point in time. Like I
Yeah,
think they were both equally guilty of what they didn't like about the other one.
Brett wasn't putting feces in anybody's salads or sandwiches
that we know of.
That's true.
Because Owen was.
No, Owen was doing funnier stuff than that. Owen was doing funnier stuff. Owen was doing much funnier stuff. But
I respect both of them. I respect the hell out of Bret Hart. But I will always be a Sean guy.
But I get very back and forth between who my number 2 is, because nobody's touching Heenan. Heenan is in a class by himself, and then it's Louis dangerously, unfortunately, does not make the Mount Rushmore. Maybe the route. I don't even know if he makes the Mount Rushmore of ECW managers. The Mount Rushmore of ECW managers probably Francine, Paulie dangerously, Bill Alfonso is probably number 1, and maybe Louis dangerously is 4th, but probably not. He's definitely better.
I would go Francine over as 1.
Fonzie's the man.
Fonzie's 2 for me. I love Fonzie, but I would go Francine over Fonzie.
Because
Francine got the worst of it. Like she was, I don't know how she's not in therapy. Like they were horrible to her.
Francine's a tough girl from Philly. She can handle it.
She's a beast. So I still have never said a word to her. I've been in 3 cons with her. I'm terrified. Like she intimidates the shit out of me.
Francine's great. I've never met her.
I know, but I'm just saying, great. Like she's.
I've met her, but I've never spoken
Francine, and she's beautiful, and you know what I mean. Like my respect for her is just like that's fucking Francine. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of actually that slide at Tom's River, I walked by, I went hi, and I just walked away. I was gonna buy an autograph, but I didn't have the courage.
the one interaction with Francine I had was at Chiller Theater in Jersey, and went there, met Demolition there, met the Iron Sheik there, and I was there with my best friend, and his oldest son was 2 years old at that point, and son's with us, and we're just walking around, and we go around this corner, and Francine looks at his son and goes, "What a cute baby!" And Francine was actually pregnant at the time too.
I would have melted. I would have melted right into my shoes.
And Francine was actually pregnant at the time, so she had the mommy genes were very strong in her at that point.
Yeah. That would have melted into my shoes. All right, so who's number 4 on the Mount Rushmore?
That is tougher. I tend to land. I go back and forth on a few people. I tend to land on Jimmy Hart. But you can make a case for Albano. You can make a case for the Grand Wizard.
Blassie.
You can make a class for Blassie. You can make a case for Sherry.
Sherry up there.
Yeah, Sherry is up there for me. Sherry might. If I usually land on Jimmy Hart, because apparently, like, I haven't seen a whole lot of it, but they say most people have never seen Jimmy Hart's best work. Like if you see Jimmy Hart with the Honky Tonk Man or the Hart Foundation or Hulk Hogan or somebody like that,
Jimmy Hart was getting stabbed and shot at. Like he was that good at what he did back in the
Jimmy
day.
Hart,
he was taking stray bullets.
Jimmy Hart in Memphis was purportedly on another level, and I know he just did so many other things. Like he was doing a lot of music stuff with them, and so Jimmy Hart is usually who I put as number 4. Jimmy Hart.
I don't hate that either. And I mean, the guy bought you a soda, you know?
Yeah. Yes, he did.
Oh man, what an episode, man! The history of Paul Heyman. BP, what do you want to do next week?
What day are we doing this next week is the other question, because Sunday we will be at PPW.
You want to shoot again for a Saturday?
We can do a Saturday again. Yeah, I have nothing going on next Saturday. I may have some going on during the day next Saturday, but I should be back
Saturday
plenty
night,
of time for Saturday night. I want to save something for May. In May, at some point, I want to do another event. I want to do Slamboree 1994 because it'll be May of 94. It'll be the 30th anniversary of the show. Or 30 years ago. It was the first pay-per-view I was ever at, and it's a very fun show.
Okay, that's
So
it.
that is coming up in the future.
Let's open it to the chat. We'll give you guys a couple minutes here. Post some ideas that you guys want to do. I know we talked about one in the earlier that Ryan Vox was to join, so we could do that one. Not next, but possibly in the future. Eddie Gilbert. Is there anything on your mind that you definitely really want to put out there and talk about?
Not
for the month of. Does the month of May spark anything up for you?
You know what? This is May. I'm an idiot. We're in May now. Let's do it. Let's do Slamboree 94 next month. So everybody fire up Peacock. We're gonna watch a show. Are you okay with this? Or
yeah. You got to get Francine in the pot. I would love to. I don't.
She probably has some amazing stories. Francine is.
I'm a Francine mark. Tag her in this.
We have nothing but good things to say about Francine. Francine's
mothers in wrestling for Mother's Day.
There you go. Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Be kind of fun.
We'll do that one, and we'll do Slamboree the week after.
All right. Top mothers in wrestling.
Yeah.
And why is it Judy Bagwell?
Yeah, well, I think we've done this before.
I think we did do mothers.
We did do that. I think we did it last year, as a matter of fact.
Was it on this platform though? Was it the old one?
Yes, I believe so, because I remember us talking a lot about Judy Bagwell. I remember us talking a lot about Judy Bagwell because shortly after that, I met Buff Bagwell.
Oh, you met him? Oh, yeah, that's right. You were at a show with him.
He was a sweetheart too. Sweetheart of a guy.
Let me.
I think it was. I want to say it was this platform. I think it was post the podcast, and it was more this live stream.
Let's see. I'm because I know for a while we had some episodes that weren't numbered, and they weren't podcasts related.
I want to say if it wasn't last year, it was the year before, but I'm pretty sure we did Mothers in Wrestling because I know we covered Judy Bagwell like pretty hardcore.
It does. I'm gonna be honest. It is kind of ringing a bell for me as well. Let's see here. All right, that's muted. It's not gonna.
It may have even been when Buff Bagwell's Dark Side of the Ring came out, or something like that.
I don't see it, so I don't think it was on this platform.
Did we cover Buff Bagwell at all?
We didn't. We did not.
Huh. All right.
We might have just had it. So, like, just to kind of go through it, we started with Smash Master preview, the death of Nancy, Alicia Atut interview, History of Sting Part 1, Chikara review, the trivia, the indie wrestling draft, which was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
The pro wrestling. We should actually. I know it's post draft. Do you want another draft another company with today's indie talent?
We could do that. Yeah.
I think that'd be a fun one. Naughty or Nice pro wrestling list, end of the year awards, pro wrestling predictions, recap show, Jerry Jarrett, No Mercy, WrestleMania 22, WrestleMania 5, 28, 29, 80s and 90s tag teams, championship drafts. Yeah, I don't see it on here.
All right, let's do it. We're in. I'm in.
All right. So we'll do so we can do Mothers, we'll do Mothers Wrestling, we'll do Slamboree, and then we'll do another independent wrestling draft.
Yeah. I'm all for that. Although I have to be very careful that indie wrestling.
Oh yeah,
draft.
We still have to do the US title history as well.
Yeah.
We'll do that for 4th of July weekend.
That sounds like a perfect
4th of July we'll do the US title. Maybe by then I can earn up a couple bucks and I can talk to some belt makers and maybe we can find a way to get a custom US title made as a giveaway or something.
If I were to get a replica belt, I'm too cheap to ever do it. I've had this discussion with people, but my first one I would get would be the old school Intercontinental title. The second one might be the WCW US title. That's one of my favorite belts.
There you go. MA likes draft too. So I might have a custom Intercontinental Championship coming, a custom podcast Intercontinental Championship coming. Sweet. We'll see how it goes. But man, thank you guys so much for having us. We appreciate you guys for tuning in and really supporting the channel. I know we've been away for a while, so we will get active on that. WrestleMania was tough, and we're doing a lot of stuff outside of this.
My brain was fried for like 2 weeks after Mania weekend.
I was shot. My
brain was fried.
But thank you guys so much. We are still doing watch alongs. So if you want to come in and hang out with me on some watch alongs, they're always there. We have a lot of great content on the Ben Frank Connection, as well as just the channel itself. 5 questions with ABJ, a whole bunch more dropping. I just did an interview with Paul London that you guys should definitely go check out. Like I said before, our YouTube membership, super chats, and donations are turned off right now. Full disclosure, I'm not working. I have no income. I was really banking on that last YouTube check to kind of help me out a little bit. And now it's on a pending hold, and I have to wait 30 days to try to open it up so I can claim the money that was there. So merchandise sales would really help, or anything you guys can do. Patreon is always there. If you can't monetarily, I get it. Hit the thumbs up button, hit subscribe, share this to your friends. Make sure you go subscribe over to Opinion City Podcast, Raz's channel, Witchcraft by Lily, High Tension Wrestling, all those channels, and really show them the support. That'll do it for us. Anything else you want to plug before we get out of here, BP?
No, I already plugged. I'll do it again. PPW Thunder Road. I believe. I don't know if they're doing this again this time, but the last couple of shows, if you're not in Pennsylvania, you're not local, if you go to Premier Wrestling's YouTube channel, the last like 2 or 3 or 4 PPW shows have been streamed live on there. But if you can make it, come on out to Slatington, Pennsylvania. It's going to be a fun time. You'll be done by like 6 o'clock at night. If you're doing something for Mother's Day, you can go hang out afterward. If you're not doing something for Mother's Day, I don't know if Funk Brewing's going to be open afterward, but if they are,
I'll be at the show. Bring your moms. I'll give her a kiss.
I believe we are going to have a moms only Philadelphia Playboy kissing booth at the show.
Nah, you just stole my bit. I was gonna do a kissing booth for the moms, but never mind. It's been
maybe get a 2-for-1 special going.
2 for 1. Yeah, you can get it. I'll have the ABJ stand, and he can do the kissing booth.
There you go.
There you go. Nothing nefarious going on there. See you guys next week. We're out of here.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this presentation. Like, share, and subscribe for more.